March 31st, 2025 was a night that would go down in history for many reasons. The White House, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, hosted an exclusive private dinner organized by none other than the legendary musician Kid Rock. The guest list was as eclectic as it was surprising, drawing together figures from various walks of life. Among the most unexpected of attendees was Bill Maher, the outspoken comedian and political commentator, known for his fierce criticism of Trump and his policies over the years. However, the evening was not just any dinner, it marked a moment of unexpected praise and camaraderie that would leave many questioning the boundaries of political discourse. Bill Maher, who had often been a vocal critic of Trump's presidency, had found himself in a surprising position. After receiving a personal invitation from Kid Rock himself, Maher decided to attend the event, perhaps intrigued by the opportunity to engage with the man who had been the center of political debate for nearly a decade. Maher, known for his biting wit and unabashed humor, had always approached Trump with sharp skepticism. But that evening, something unexpected transpired. Dana White, the president of the UFC and another prominent figure at the dinner, had long been a supporter of Trump, and his presence added an air of unpredictability to the evening. White had a history of endorsing Trump's business acumen and leadership style, and it seemed that the night's gathering would be an opportunity for both sides to find common ground, if only for a moment. As Maher sat at the long table in the White House's grand dining room, surrounded by figures who had long been in the public eye for both their support and opposition to Trump, it became evident that this dinner would be more than just a social gathering. The atmosphere was a blend of laughter, casual conversation, and the occasional deeper, more philosophical exchanges. Kid Rock, ever the character, played the role of the gracious host, ensuring that everyone felt at ease. It was clear that this was not a formal political event, but rather a relaxed gathering where individuals from different corners of the political and entertainment spectrum could come together, break bread, and perhaps even understand one another a bit more. However, the real surprise came later that evening when Bill Maher found himself, for the first time, publicly praising President Trump. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere in the White House dining room became increasingly relaxed. Laughter echoed through the room as people exchanged stories and anecdotes, with Kid Rock playing the role of the unorthodox host who kept everyone at ease. Dana White, ever the businessman, engaged in lively conversations with Trump's advisors, while Maher, typically known for his sharp wit and irreverence, found himself quietly observing the dynamics in the room. At one point, President Trump, who had been conversing with Kid Rock, turned toward the group and addressed them with his usual larger-than-life personality. As expected, the conversation veered into politics, a subject that everyone at the table had an opinion on. For Maher, this was the moment he had been anticipating, a chance to observe Trump up close and to test his own thoughts on the man who had been a central figure in American politics for so long. What happened next caught everyone off guard. As Trump made his remarks about the state of the nation and the upcoming 2024 election, Maher, who had been largely quiet up until then, leaned forward and said, "You know, I've disagreed with you on just about everything. But I can't help but give you credit for one thing: you've never backed down. And in today's political climate, that's something I respect." There was a brief silence at the table as Maher's words hung in the air. Dana White, who had known Maher for years but had rarely seen him in such a candid moment, nodded in agreement. The shock wasn't so much in Maher's comment, but in the fact that he had publicly acknowledged Trump's unwavering commitment to his cause, even if Maher didn't align with that cause. Trump, who had been known for his quick-witted and often combative responses, seemed genuinely taken aback. He smiled, a rare moment of genuine warmth breaking through his usually confident, sometimes brash demeanor. "Well, Bill, I've always said you have to be tough in this game," Trump said, his voice carrying the familiar tone of someone who had weathered countless controversies. Kid Rock, who had long been a supporter of Trump, raised his glass and offered a toast. "To staying true to yourself, no matter what the world throws at you," he said, his voice booming across the room. The gesture was met with laughter, but it also served as a moment of reflection for everyone present. For Maher, the dinner was turning into something far more meaningful than he had initially expected. Despite their many differences, he was beginning to see Trump in a new light. The evening was not about political allegiance, it was about humanizing the man who had been the subject of countless debates, jokes, and criticisms. Maher's comment wasn't an endorsement of Trump's policies, but rather an acknowledgement of his resilience, something that even Maher couldn't deny. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted to other topics. But the words Maher had spoken lingered in the air. The dinner had given Maher a rare opportunity to step outside of his usual persona, to set aside the comedian who made a living off mocking Trump, and to see the president in a more personal context. The dinner continued well into the night, with conversations shifting from politics to more personal topics. Kid Rock, always the life of the party, made sure that everyone felt comfortable, encouraging guests to share stories and experiences beyond the political realm. This shift in tone seemed to ease the tension that had been lingering earlier in the evening, and Bill Maher, now with a few drinks in him, began to open up more. The usual sharp-edged humor that defined Maher's public persona softened as he spoke about his experiences in Hollywood, the challenges of working in a politically divided environment, and the evolution of his own views on various issues. He had always been known for his criticism of the establishment, but tonight, in the presence of figures like Kid Rock, Dana White, and even Trump himself, Maher found himself in a moment of rare introspection. One of the most interesting conversations occurred when Maher and Trump found themselves engaged in a private discussion about the media. Both men had their own grievances with the mainstream media, albeit for very different reasons. Trump, ever the critic of the fake news industry, vented his frustrations with what he saw as biased coverage of his presidency. Maher, on the other hand, spoke candidly about the challenges of navigating a media landscape where every word he said seemed to be scrutinized and twisted to fit a narrative. "You know, Bill," Trump said, leaning in with a more serious expression, "the media's not your friend. They're just out to get you. They never give you a break, and they twist everything you say." There was a hint of familiarity in Trump's voice, as if he was speaking from years of experience being under the media's microscope. Maher, nodding thoughtfully, responded, "I get it. They're always looking for the next big thing to tear down. It's exhausting sometimes, just trying to make a point without being turned into some kind of caricature." Maher had always been critical of the way the media covered Trump, but that night, he saw the president's point. In a way, they were both victims of the same system. As the conversation between Maher and Trump continued, they found themselves speaking about their mutual love for the entertainment industry. Trump, who had a long history in television with The Apprentice, and Maher, whose career was built on political commentary and satire, shared stories about the ups and downs of working in the public eye. "Television's a funny thing," Trump remarked, swirling his glass of wine. "People either love you or hate you. There's no in-between. But you've got to embrace it, you know? You can't let them get to you." Maher, now more reflective than usual, agreed. "Yeah, the whole industry is built on pushing boundaries and getting attention. But sometimes I wonder if it's all just a distraction from the real issues." Trump, ever the optimist, shrugged. "Maybe. But at least it keeps people talking." As the evening drew to a close, Maher couldn't help but feel a sense of curiosity that hadn't been there before. He had spent so many years mocking Trump, yet here he was, sitting across from the president at the White House, having a candid conversation. In that moment, Maher realized that there was more to the man than the headlines and sound bites that had defined his public image for so long. Kid Rock, noticing the shift in energy at the table, raised his glass once more. "Here's to the unpredictability of life," he said, his words slurring slightly. "You never know what's going to happen next." Everyone at the table raised their glasses in agreement, with a few chuckles breaking out. Maher, for the first time that night, found himself smiling genuinely. It had been a night of surprises, and though he still disagreed with many of Trump's policies, he had gained a new perspective on the man. Politics had always been a game of us versus them, but tonight, it felt like a rare moment of shared humanity. The evening at the White House, organized by Kid Rock and attended by a surprising mix of political and entertainment figures, had come to a close, but the ripple effects of that dinner would be felt for weeks to come. For Bill Maher, it had been an experience unlike any other. As he left the White House, his mind was buzzing with thoughts of the night's events, the candid conversations, the moments of unexpected camaraderie, and the surprising praise he had given to President Trump. Back in his studio, Maher knew that his comments about Trump would soon make headlines. After all, the media was always watching, waiting for a soundbite or a moment to latch onto. But he was prepared for the backlash that was sure to come. It wasn't lost on him that his praise for Trump would be seen by many as a betrayal of his usual political stance. The left would likely accuse him of compromising his principles, while Trump supporters would undoubtedly view his remarks with suspicion. Yet, Maher stood by his words. He wasn't endorsing Trump or his policies, but he was acknowledging something that few others had the courage to admit: Trump's resilience. The man had endured years of public scrutiny, relentless media attacks, and the constant weight of political polarization. Whether Maher agreed with him or not, there was something undeniably impressive about his ability to weather the storm. In the days following the dinner, the news outlets were filled with headlines about Maher's unexpected praise of Trump. "Bill Maher praises Trump's resilience at White House dinner," read one headline. Comedian Bill Maher surprises everyone with respect for President Trump, said another. The media was ablaze with discussions about what this meant for Maher's future as a political commentator. Would he soften his stance on Trump? Could he reconcile his criticism of the president with the acknowledgement of his toughness? Maher took to his show Real Time with Bill Maher to address the controversy. As expected, the audience was eager to hear what he had to say about the dinner and the unexpected praise he had given Trump. Look, Maher began, pacing the stage with his usual energy. I've been pretty vocal about my disagreements with President Trump. I've made jokes, I've criticized him, I've called him out on just about every policy he's ever pushed. But here's the thing, we all know that in politics, it's easy to tear someone down from a distance. But when you sit across from someone, look them in the eye, and hear them speak, it changes the game. I might not agree with Trump's policies, but I have to give the guy credit, he's tough. You don't get to be president for as long as he has without some serious resilience. The audience, accustomed to Maher's biting commentary, seemed slightly taken aback. They weren't used to hearing this kind of measured reflection from him, especially not about someone like Trump. But let's get something straight, Maher continued, his tone shifting slightly. That doesn't mean I'm about to start wearing a MAGA hat or anything. It's just that sometimes you have to admit when someone has qualities that are admirable even if you don't like everything they stand for. Maher's comments were met with mixed reactions from his viewers. Some of his fans felt betrayed, unable to reconcile Maher's usual criticism of Trump with the newfound respect he had expressed. Others, however, appreciated his honesty and willingness to acknowledge Trump's resilience in the face of constant adversity. It was a rare moment of political nuance, one that reminded people that sometimes, even in the most polarized times, there were shades of gray. Meanwhile, the news surrounding the dinner continued to dominate headlines. Dana White, who had also been at the dinner, made his own rounds on talk shows, discussing the event in his usual straightforward manner. White, a longtime supporter of Trump, had been more vocal in his praise of the president, but even he acknowledged the surprise of Maher's comments. There's always a lot of noise around politics, and Bill's a guy who's been very outspoken against Trump, White said in one interview. But the guy went to that dinner and he saw something different. I think that's what's important, being open to seeing things from another perspective, even if it means acknowledging something you didn't expect. The dinner had, in many ways, done exactly what it was meant to do, bring together people from opposing sides of the political spectrum and facilitate conversations that were difficult to have in the public eye. It was a moment of understanding, albeit a brief one, where individuals who had spent years in ideological battle found themselves in a space where respect and admiration could be shared. For Bill Maher, the aftermath of the dinner would continue to shape his political commentary moving forward. He knew that his words had sparked debate, but he also understood that it was important to continue challenging the narrative, especially in times when political discourse had become so polarized. The dinner with Kid Rock, Trump, and the others had been a reminder that, even in the most divided of times, there was always room for dialogue. As the weeks passed following the private dinner at the White House, the ripple effect of that night continued to reverberate through American culture and politics. Bill Maher's words, though initially met with skepticism and surprise, began to spark more nuanced discussions about political polarization and the need for cross-party dialogue. It wasn't just Maher's praise of Trump that had captured the public's attention, it was the larger message he had inadvertently sent, that in the midst of a divided nation, we still had the capacity for understanding, even if we didn't always agree on everything. For Maher, the experience had been eye-opening. He had spent years ridiculing Trump and anyone who aligned with him, firmly placing himself on the left side of the political spectrum. But the dinner had reminded him of something he had long forgotten, the importance of personal connection and the power of seeing a person beyond their public persona. Trump, despite being a divisive figure, was not just a political opponent, he was a human being with his own set of complexities. In that moment, Maher realized that it was easier to demonize someone when you kept them at arm's length, but once you sat down and shared a meal, things started to look a little different. Maher continued to field questions about the dinner on his show, discussing how the evening had challenged his assumptions and forced him to reckon with his own biases. I've always said that we need more empathy in politics, and I think the dinner was a great example of that, Maher said to his audience during one of his real-time monologues. I went in with my guard up, expecting the worst, but I left with a newfound understanding of the man and his approach. I'm not saying I agree with him, but I've gained a respect for his ability to stay true to himself no matter the criticism. That kind of fortitude is rare in today's world. The dinner had become a pivotal moment not only for Maher but for the larger political discourse. As he reflected on the evening, he began to see the value in moments of bipartisan engagement. In a time when the political landscape seemed defined by vitriol and ideological warfare, the dinner served as a reminder that common ground could still be found even in the most unexpected of places. In the following months, Maher began to advocate more openly for a shift in the way Americans approached political discussions. He used his platform to call for greater civility and understanding, urging his viewers to engage with people who held opposing views without immediately resorting to insults or dismissals. "We don't have to agree on everything," he said, "but if we can't even talk to each other, then we're truly lost as a country."